Welcome to Dave and Dharm DeMystify, a FinTech Futures podcast, helping make sense of the world of FinTech and digital finance. Please sit back and listen as the two Ds take a subject and discuss it to make it clearer and easier to understand.
DeMystify.
Welcome everybody to the Dave and Dharm DeMystify show, and this week we are yet again going to talk about AI, but this time we're going to demystify AI adoption. And who better to do this than Ben Sheedy from Synthwise? Welcome, Ben, and would you like to just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Synthwise?
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Dharm. Hey, David. So Synthwise is a early stage startup. It's myself and my colleague Tom Statter, two co-founders, and we've both been on a journey of AI since about 2021 with the previous startup that we worked at, where we're building a data privacy product. And we used a third-party vendor called Elder Research, and they had some data scientists, and they helped us with a prototype to build a way for people to understand privacy agreements. And it was using language models, so a really early GPT model, and it didn't work very well at all. So Tom and I sort of got the bug using AI, and then as soon as ChatGPT came out, we were all over it. And really, through our own adoption and all the friction that we encountered, it sort of turned into a business. So Tom's an engineer, so Tom's just seeing how far he could push AI development. So rather than write all the code, he'd get 5, Claude agents, for example, via Cursor, and he'd just start building. I was taking it from a slightly different point of view, which was around AI consultancy and how can we get people using it in the right way? Because it's not just another technology to be rolled out. You've got to completely change how you think and behave. And so we ended up with, well, how could Synthwise, the platform, help businesses with their AI adoption? We don't want to jump straight to agentic workflows when 20% of the workforce have never even used ChatGPT before. I mean, it's just the wrong sort of use case for them. So we thought, well, what are the 3 biggest problems? And came up with this 3 silo challenge effectively. So one of them is around vendors. At the moment, most businesses just give everyone Copilot or ChatGPT. So there's a bit of a vendor silo, just giving everyone the same model, but it's not the best at anything. It's kind of like a pretty generic version. It's not the best at coding. It's not the best at visuals, those types of things. So why would you? And then you've got to worry about the big tech owners of these models, like the Sam Altmans that talk about, we've got to suddenly monetize more because we're hundreds of billions in the hole and we're going to put ads on the dashboard. Oh, okay. And if you put all of your business context into that, that's probably not a great move. The second one was around individuals. At the moment, individuals are becoming really productive. Some individuals are becoming very productive, but business leaders are not really seeing much sort of change in ROI for a team or a department or the overall business because they can't share anything. It's just these individuals become really productive. Maybe they're going for long lunches or leaving early or getting that promotion, but it's not really helping the business at the moment. And the third one, it seems to be lots of leaders are sort of worried about connecting their data. And you've got this paradox where if you don't connect your data, you get the same outputs as everyone else, all your competitors. But people are concerned about connecting enterprise proprietary data because they're worried about it being trained by models, going off into the US-based cloud, those types of things. So really around those, the sort of expertise, the collaboration, and the sort of data privacy angle, that was the genesis of Synthwise. So we've been doing that for about just over a year now.
Just going on the first silo problem about the vendors and the models, how do you manage multiple models? And can you have it so that some of the models you get from the cloud and some of what you're doing, let's say for development, we don't mind doing it in the cloud, but actually when it comes to customer data and providing advice on, let's say, financial services, I want that done on premise because that's something I don't really want to leak out anywhere else. Is that possible? And if so, how?
It's definitely possible. Yes, we think it's necessary. So we connect via an open router API, which is basically a one-to-many. So you can get access to all of these models, but via the APIs. So you're not getting the chat interface of ChatGPT, you're getting the API some OpenAI provide. We have access to over 100 models, so you can start to see which ones you like. If you're trying to build this adoption, maybe I like the way that Gemini responds versus Grok. Lots of it's subjective. They've got these little sort of tweaks and personalities and how they respond. Some are more, they're all pretty sycophantic, but some are probably more sycophantic than others. So there's the technical capability to do that, absolutely. And then there are some models like Mistral, French-based, that talk about GDPR and the AI Act and privacy, and Cohere, I think a Canadian, and even IBM have got a great suite of models called I think they're called Granite, different types of models, and some of them are small language models, and if they're small, you can deploy them on-prem. So the multi-model strategy, which I think is really critical for businesses, is not just maybe a couple of people in marketing that want to play around with different models. It's more, well, should departments have different models, or should it be the data that then sort of creates this path to say, well, if you're using sensitive data, you can only use an on-prem model like you talked about, Dharm. So I think it's almost like an easy route via a single interface. You can remove this risk of shadow AI, because I've done some work in the last year where big organizations, they just have co-pilots. Whatever it does is they just hop on their Gmail, they ping something over to Claude, they get a great response, and then they ping it back. But the business doesn't know what data is going in and out of these models that way. So I think there's the big risk if you can kind of create frameworks that help people use the right model for the right job, and you sort of educate them on that use case. Then I'm not saying you need to use 100, but probably 3 to 5 would be pretty ideal.
It's really interesting, just sort of thinking about that in kind of terms of leakage. I mean, you had the whole Hillary Clinton thing with her using a personal email, and I think someone else has been caught using their own computer as well. So one of the things I kind of ponder about all of this stuff is you can put all these guardrails in place, but you're still going to have leakage, which is going to kind of happen because, and particularly if you then start having a sort of a universe of models that people can use, I just sort of wonder, like, how do people keep track of all of this stuff? So what's your view on that kind of leakage? Because it sort of feels like something that will inevitably happen, that people will just end up using their own laptop and just uploading a presentation or confidential information and asking the question. What are your thoughts around that?
I think you can navigate that by creating a culture that actually wants people to use these tools. And so they don't have to hide in the shadows and not disclose that they're using it because they're trying to just do the work quicker for their boss, because something like that. I think if there is a culture where it's almost expected to be using it, and then people have the awareness to understand that if they do suddenly upload some personal information from the CRM or something, there's a huge risk, reputational risk that comes with doing that for their company, for them and their clients. So I think it's a bit of maybe an educational thing to sort of say, well, we're fine with you doing it, but if you want to use this purpose, then do not use these particular models, or maybe strip out certain sort of PII before you upload bits of information. So again, I think at the moment there seems to be sort of different schools of thoughts as to why people are using it and how they're sort of using it. I've still speaking to people and pretty big fintechs, and they do not allow anyone to use these things. It's just carpet sort of banned at the moment, which I find crazy. But so they've taken the nth degree of we're so worried about the risk that you mentioned, Dave, that they just don't allow it to happen.
I was going to say, like, if you try and stop people from you, they'll use it anyway. I mean, and I really like your point about actually, if I was forced to use certain models, I won't go into which ones, I would just end up going, oh, I'm not going to use it because they're rubbish compared to other models. So I'd find ways of circumvent. So actually having a mature approach to AI I'm answering my own question, help prevent some of these things from happening. So I can totally see and understand why having a kind of framework around suitability for different models to do different things for different people would make a huge amount of sense.
And I think just getting people to be open about using these things and using it in the right way, not I came up against this wonderful phrase by a lady called Sol Rashidi, who calls herself the first chief AI officer. And she's got wonderful content. She talks about AI atrophy and saying that you can just treat the stuff to outsource your thinking. It's so easy now to generate anything. Is it? Write me a business case. It'll be 30 pages long. It'll take 2 minutes. If you don't do any thinking for that, it's going to be very mediocre. And all you're doing is you're just pushing the work somewhere else. So I think if people are worried about people adopting AI in those types of ways, they're worried about the mediocre output, then it's a risk. But if you go down the route of, well, let's help people use the right tools for the right jobs and use it for brainstorming. Don't outsource your thinking. Use it to critique. Use it as a collaboration partner, as a mentor, these types of things. Then I think people will instinctively know through use. Oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't upload this information. And yeah, I think you just sort of remove that concern through education and engagement.
I think this is why that one of the most future-proof skills is critical thinking. It's the ability to question everything. Even the feedback that you get back, it might sound super intelligent, like it's produced this 30-page business plan, but you still have to have the nous to be able to say, well, yeah, I kind of see where you're getting at, but that's not the market that we're aiming for, and because blah, blah, blah. So you still have to reason, but I don't think you can fully delegate anything and suppose that it's the master of everything.
Yeah.
Is that a fair comment? I mean,
yeah, I would agree. I guess that people talk about it, AI as a great sort of multiplier tool. But what's it multiplying? If you don't put any effort in, you just put in a one-line prompt, write me a business case about X, you're going to get very average outputs. If you've got lots of domain expertise or you've done lots of research and you put lots of wonderful contextual information in, it's a whole different ballgame, what the output you get. So yeah, I totally agree, Tom.
It was just a quick thing on education, though, because I think just picking up on that, there does have to be education about how you use the tools. And I think that should start in school. So, I just did at a school, they have a great initiative, which is their sixth formers, they have professionals and people like me turn up and do interviews with the kids to sort of help them prepare for university and jobs and et cetera, et cetera. And that was one of my questions is, have you used ChatGPT in terms of getting your CV together? Are you worried about AI in terms of your job choices and your future, et cetera, et cetera? And there was a real aversion to talking about it. And as if to say, oof, I can't admit to whether I've used it or not. And you kind of then reflect that might be what's going on in the school. But, I guess we've got to kind of get with the program a bit and say, well, actually, these tools are here. We can use them, but we need to be trained into using them. And part of that training could be, how do you use them in the most positive, secure way? Because it won't come naturally to people to do that. So, I just wondered if you've sort of thought about kind of education more broadly back to kind of school level around this stuff as well.
And in terms of how I talk to my two girls about it, but one of them was trying to do, if I'm not careful, they use Perplexity and they'll quickly get an answer to a math sum and I'll look at it and I'll think, hang on, you haven't done any workings for that. There's suddenly a blank of like, you've obviously just put in a question. Or one of them recently took a photo of a jigsaw and I didn't realize this, but it actually, out of a messy pile of jigsaw pieces, it identified the right piece and sort of pointed her towards it. So I think kids will find their own sort of shortcuts, right? Like the human brain loves a shortcut. I mean, it's ingrained in us. We will always take the path of least resistance and probably have done for millennia. But I think you're absolutely right, Dave. I think there needs to be a much broader conversation because it's not going to, Pandora's box is open. This is never going away. Soon it will be, every business will just talk AI like electricity or Wi-Fi or the internet. It's not a differentiator. It's just everywhere. So I think it's people who will be using it. It's just kids never got taught how to engage with social media. We probably didn't get taught how to use the internet. You just had to go off and spend time trawl through what's truth, what's fiction, those types of things. It's going to be so much, the learning curve is going to be so much steeper and the impacts could be so much more dramatic with these new tools because they're just so much more instant and so they could appear so smart, but it can be very, very shallow if you don't have that expertise underneath it.
I totally agree. I mean, I think, which is why it kind of surprises me that there are big companies still blocking the use of AI. It's almost like an act of self-harming the company. Whereas other companies know that actually this is not necessarily good for the greater good in terms of employing people, giving people purpose. But if they don't do it, they'll lose to their competitors who do it and gain the efficiencies.
Absolutely. Almost the two trained schools of thought is you can see it as a risk or you can see it as an opportunity, can't you? And I think even within the opportunity, there's some that just want to focus on maybe being more productive and efficient and reducing costs. And companies like Klarna have just made massive redundancies. And I think they had to bring loads back because they're a bit premature in making that decision, but they saw it as a cost-saving tool, which I fundamentally disagree with. I'd much rather companies think about the augmentation. So rather than what can you save on costs, so sort of looking backwards, rather everyone just look forward to say, well, how do we augment? How do we do something that wasn't possible before? How do we invent something? Those types of use cases for AI, I think are far more positive and far more helps people stay, these businesses help them stay relevant for the next 3 years, because God knows what the future landscape is going to look like with this pace of change.
I mean, that is a really interesting perspective. I mean, we're at this weird point in time where, Klarna and there's a few others who are starting to remove costs. They'll inevitably have some consultancy behind them. So, these are the things you could do in order to reduce costs. And like these consultancies, they sort of win on the way down and they win on the way up, basically. So there's probably double bubble in there for companies to get rid of people and then, re-employ people because there's a new strategy. But it just sort of feels like that is the kind of prevailing narrative around cost, I think. How do you kind of make sure that companies readjust their thinking around this? Because if I'm a CFO and you come in and you talk about enhancing, that doesn't sound quite so attractive as cost reduction or quite so easy to do.
Yeah, I would agree. It's more challenging. It's because it is for companies that found digital transformation difficult, I think this is another layer on top of that in terms of complexity. You've got to transform everything, not just the workflows, but the ways of thinking. I think it's to your point around the CFO thinking as a cost, focusing on the cost reduction. If you're also trying to ask people to adopt something and you're trying to increase adoption and engagement, why on earth would employees adopt something when you're doing it to make people redundant? There is just a counterintuitive flow where it'd be the opposite effect. If I knew that you were doing it for those reasons, I've heard this phrase of what's the why of AI? Like, why are you deploying these things? Is it because everyone else is? Is it FOMO? Or do you genuinely want to do something that wasn't possible before? And if your why is efficiency, I can read into that. That means headcount reduction and my job might be at risk. And my anxiety is probably going to stop me from using the very tools that you want me to become really efficient at. So I think you could maybe navigate that concern by the CEO narrative down, which is we want to build more with the existing team. We want you all to maybe remove some of the mundane tasks from your sort of day-to-day, remove the admin. What do you not have enough time to do? Or where is there more value in your week? Having maybe 2 on-site client visits with people, but you can't do that right now because you're just head down responding to 200 emails a day, for example. If we could reduce that time doing email triage, maybe you can go and spend more time and build better relationships, those types of things. That was the culture. I think people would then start to adopt these things, but I think the culture is it's an efficiency play. I think there's actually a barrier to using these things in the first place.
This point about efficiency, it surprises me because I remember when I first started working in a bank, I did something well, I think, one thing well. And I got to meet Sir Brian Pittman, who was the CEO of Lloyds Bank at the time. And I got to ask him a question. And my question was, if you could save 50p in the pound, or you could double your revenue, what would you do? Right. And at that point in time, Lloyds Bank cost income ratio. So for every 80p they spent, they made £1. So actually, if you halved the cost, it's a massive impact, right? And he said, without a pause, unequivocally, I would double the revenue every day of the week. I'd even just go for an extra £1 because I can cut costs at any point in time. Generating additional revenue is much harder. So you need to do that first And then if you really need to, and you run out of ideas, you basically then start cutting costs. And that's how basically for his tenure, he pretty much doubled the share price every 2 years. And after he left, it didn't rise at all. So for me, that was an important, like really valuable early lesson. And you're right. I see the same thing happened with digitalization. It went from, we can use this technology to change the business to, we can use this technology to digitize stuff, therefore make it easier and better or more efficient. And the same thing's happening with AI. What is it you're doing with Synthwise that will help to overcome that kind of issue within an organization?
So I think that is probably more of the consultancy angle that would have to go around the product integration. Because just like any language model, you can use it for any purpose. If you took our product and you wanted to cut headcount and make efficiency plays, then that's completely feasible. We would just advise against doing that. So I think it is, I think that's why we've tried to, the way that we're thinking around the Synthwise is a dual offering. We can absolutely start with giving you a single interface for these models. We think that if we can help businesses increase the AI proficiency of their employees, it kind of changes product management. So rather than what I did in my previous company, where we're trying to sell a product and we're always worried about product market fit, is this really the job that someone needs to do, or are we really solving the number one friction point in these data sharing journeys with open banking and things like that? With Synthwise, we're thinking if we give people access to these models and they then become proficient using them, they build their own customized projects like you can in all the different Gemini gems, Claude projects, custom GPTs, etc. Then when we start to unveil, you can also automate workflows and we've got agents you can deploy, really we want the users to create their own use cases. So we don't have that product market fit. It becomes this sort of operating system for a business to become and use all these tools. They know, every individual knows what the biggest pain point in their day-to-day is or what their department is. Doesn't need external consultants coming in telling them, top down, you need to do X, Y, and Z, because it works for all your competitors. So I think that's the sort of the angle we're taking, Dharm. It's a little bit different. It's trying to help people use these tools, create that safety, create that transparency for business leaders, and let people go and explore and experiment. And they'll very quickly find those use cases. And hopefully that means that when you're sort of creating a new vision, a new version of this company, of your company, you don't really have that decision to make necessarily about, where are we going to reduce headcount? Because hopefully you're growing the pie, you're creating these new sort of opportunities. And maybe you are removing sort of admin, you're removing the repetitiveness, but then it's just a reallocation. It's sort of moving, it's changing people's roles. It's making everyone AI native. So everyone gets an uplift. I heard another podcast, I can't remember the lady's name, she's from BCG, and she was talking about, they did this study internally and they optimized customer services. So they only got certain calls. But what they did is they completely removed the joy from these people's roles because they love solving problems. And if you give all the easy problems to chatbots, then they were just left with the really complex stuff. And they had no sense of achievement because nothing, everything was dragging out for 3 months. So I think that sort of element of keeping not just the joy, but also the value and making sure people are sort of keeping that in their roles.
It's really interesting, that whole human side. You talked about the complexity of digital transformation. I think you're totally right that this is the next level of complexity. I think part of the issue with where we're at the moment is people think this is perhaps slightly more straightforward. So even talking to you now, I'm like, okay, so if you did have a strategy around use of AI in your business, it needs to encompass the sorts of things you're talking about in terms of how, why, what, when you're kind of using these technologies. I think it's forcing us to go back to kind of basics. So like Dharmesh says, the CEO of a bank, he has this position and therefore the whole business, and obviously he works in consultation with other people, but the whole business works around that kind of idea. I think AI is sort of stripping all of the crap away. So, if companies want an efficiency play, that will become very, very obvious. And, they'll be picked apart on the back of it. So I think it's incumbent on every business to really reflect on their strategy, how they achieve their strategy, what that means for employees, what that means for customers. And they need to do it really, really quickly, because if they're not doing it, their competitors probably are.
Yeah, completely agree. Digital transformation, I worked at a big bank when that was going on, when I was at Publicis, and they rolled out this big campaign. I'm not joking, when they just gave everyone a tablet. That was their big announcement. And you just thought, you're just focusing on the sort of shiny thing at the end. You're not changing any of your workflows or customer journeys. And I think some firms are going down that same route with AI. It is, oh, let's just bolt on AI at the end. And that becomes very obvious, I think, because that we don't get any transformation gains, whether it's augmentation of value or efficiency, because it's the same old stuff with AI at the end, rather than, well, how do we go right at go back to the very beginning of these workflows, step by step, and assess if AI can help in certain steps, and where it can help, and how, and should we do this, and those types of questions. And I say, David, that's where the complexity is, that's where the effort lies. But if the companies that take time to do that, I think they're the ones that become relevant in 3 years' time, because I think a lot of companies are going to fall by the wayside, because AI is just going to really transform everything. You're not going to need as many businesses in any sector. I think there's going to be real competitive advantage to be gained by sort of becoming AI native and really changing. People is always the hardest part of the digital transformation. It's can change the tech, process, data challenges, but getting people to use new workflows is challenging. Getting people to think differently, that's a different ballgame altogether, and change their behavior is profoundly challenging.
How much of this has to be top down? Like, if I think about it, yes, there was a lot of smart people at Lloyds Bank at the time I worked there, so I'm surprised I got through. But fundamentally, I would put the success of the organization down to Sir Brian Pittman, his vision, and then the execution of a strategy through his team, right? So how much of it do you think is, from an AI transformation perspective, how much of it is it like really top down, big level thinking versus bottom up, people trying to drag the organization into a new world? I mean, I guess there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just really like your perspective on this.
I'm not trying to hedge, but I think you need both.
It's a bit of both.
I think the reason it needs to be top down is to sort of create a culture of psychological safety, of experimentation, of freedom. Don't just ask people to use it, but maybe give them Friday mornings, clear their calendars and say, up between 9 and 12, just play about with AI. Just use it. I'm not forcing you to do it at 9 o'clock at night when you've had a busy day or your family time at the weekends. We will create space for you to try these tools because it's in the business's benefits. I think certain mandates that come top down. I think the CEO needs to be using AI. I think they should show themselves using AI, including all the things that they're getting wrong and saying, oh, here's my weekly out, my email that comes out, the first 3 versions AI helps me with. And then I sort of created the last version where I think that's really important to make people feel, okay, we're all in this together. The bottom up component, so those use cases, I think need to come from people. I think all employees need to become AI proficient. They need to know the nuances. They need to know the biases. They need to know what's good, what's not. They can find the right use cases. I don't think it should be CEOs saying, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z because the C-suite did an offsite for the afternoon and these are the best use cases we've got for everybody. I don't think that's the right approach. So I would say top down and bottom up, but for slightly different reasons.
It's a fascinating conversation. Really, really interesting. I mean, it's completely opened my thinking up to some things that I hadn't been considering. So on my side, I really appreciate it. Dharmesh, any last questions before we let Ben go?
I guess, Ben, you're helping companies adopt. Can you give our listeners 1 or 2 tips for successfully adopting AI across their enterprise?
Sure. I would encourage people to think about it as a people challenge and not a technology integration. It's general purpose technology. There's no manual. There's nothing. If someone asks you create a use case for electricity, it's people don't mind. Brains don't work that way. And because it is so big, the default at the moment seems to be, the ChatGPT window. A lot of people use it like Google, single questions to get a simple answer. So I think focusing on the people, creating that culture of experimentation and safety so people can use it. And I think explain to your organization why you're taking them down this path. It's not existential risk. It's, yet anyway, we're not looking to reduce headcount. We're doing it because we want everyone to flourish. We want people, like workforce, I suppose augmentation is a way of thinking it, not just to sort of automate things.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ben.
No, thanks a lot, guys. This is my podcast debut. I've absolutely loved it. It's a topic close to my heart, and I appreciate the invite, and great talking to you both.
Did amazingly for a first one, amazingly well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to Dave and Dharm Demystify. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tune in next time as we take another topic and demystify it.